All right. As I said before, the recording started. Hello, good evening, or good afternoon to you, depending on where you are across the country. It was so great to see so many people registering from so many different places. I just want to welcome everybody to tonight's orientation presentation. Because we'll be respectful of your time, we are going to end 60 minutes, I promise you, no matter what. We will be monitoring the chat room for any questions you might have in the moment, so we can try to answer those as they come up. Or if you have a question that you're afraid you're going to forget, please feel free to type it in the Q&A in the chat box. Also, just be sure to keep yourself muted for the duration of the presentation. It's just going to make it easier for everybody to hear what it is that Bob and I are saying. And fear not, because we are recording this, you will get a copy of the recording if you want to share it with some other members who were also curious but were not able to attend. I believe we're going to try to email it to everybody, but we're also going to put it on the registration website. So if you went to our partners website, actually, I could put it on the in the chat box so that everybody has it. So that's the registration page. It's the page that tells you all about New Dollars, New Partners, and all the rest. So I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to, slide it over to Bob for him to introduce himself. My name's Karen DiLossi. I'm the Senior Director of Programs for Partners for Sacred Places. And I have the honor of being the also director of this program, specifically of our New Dollars, New Partners program. I've been at Partners for 14 years. If you can believe it, Bob, it'll be 15 in August.
Wow.
And I have found so much joy in this work and working with congregations all across the country. And I'm really looking forward to meeting all of you tonight, but then also whoever gets to join us in the national cohort. So welcome, Bob. I would love for you to just say a couple words.
Oh, great, Karen. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Bob Jaeger. I'm the president of Partners for Sacred Places. And I have been very fortunate to have been involved in offering the New Dollars program for the entirety of its existence, which is now getting to be 15, 20 years. And it's been just a great pleasure to work with Karen on this program. And as you probably have heard, this is only the second time when this program is available to congregations anywhere across the nation. So I'm just thrilled to be. I recognize a few congregation names when I looked at the registration list, but many of you are new to me, so we're looking forward to getting to know you a bit better.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bob. Excellent. Okay, so just this very short presentation is going to cover the ins and outs of our New Dollars, New Partners program. At the core of the training, we're ultimately training you to realize your value beyond just your members, your seats on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Friday. This training program is a flagship program of partners and is really the foundation of so much that we do in our programs and services. We look forward to serve all faiths who worship and who use older, historic, purpose-built religious properties. There are, just so you know, there are currently like 3 modules. We're going to talk about those in detail tonight. And we aim to train anywhere between 8 to 10 congregations in one cohort. Last year, we had a waiting list for folks who weren't able to get into the cohort. So actually, 2 of the slots that we have for the fall of 2026 are already taken. So they swooped it up as soon as I was able to offer it to them since they were on last year's waiting list. So we're really excited to be able to offer this. And actually, you have the special pleasure of having 2 options to consider, which we're going to talk about at the very end. There'll be one for the fall of this year and actually one for the spring of 2027. So we're planning 2 of them in a row. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Bob.
Well, thank you, Karen. So we thought we'd start with a little bit about Partners for Sacred Places. Some of you know us well, and some of you less well. So just a few words. We're the only national nonprofit with a focus on helping congregations and neighborhoods take care of our older sacred places and use them well as places of worship, as places of service, as places of outreach. And we often say we're at this interesting intersection of heritage. Obviously, these are older buildings of great value to the communities. Faith, of course, the congregations who use these buildings and own these buildings, and the larger community. So we really say that we're about helping congregations and about helping the neighborhoods they're in. And we'll talk a lot more about what the broader range of what we offer, which includes consulting and training and research. But we have grown quite a bit over the last 40 years, almost 40 years. Next slide.
Mhm.
So yeah, we were founded in just shortly after leaders from these communities started to talk to each other and meet in the late 80s. So we were founded in 89, about 2 years after. I date back to those days. We started to talk to each other, compare notes, and by 89, we agreed to found partners. And we're really proud of the fact that the Lilly Endowment, which, as you probably know, is really interested in healthy congregations. The Lilly Endowment has been supporting us without interruption all these years. And the J.M. Kaplan Fund in New York was another early funder. And we really wanted to connect congregations, denominational leaders, provide new resources, new publications. We still have an information center here, by the way, and then develop and disseminate best practices. How can a congregation take care of its building, fund its building, maximize the use of its building, and invite the community to support and be a part of all this? So those are some of the themes you'll be hearing about tonight. Next slide. So just a few other little details about partners. Again, I've said we're national. We have our headquarters in Philadelphia, but we have staff across the country. We'll talk more about our research findings because it's really the basis for a lot of our work, including New Dollars. Our research and public policy is based on our findings on how your sacred place and others like yours really has enormous value to the larger community. So we'll share that. We've done a lot of training. So New Dollars is our original, it's our classic training program, and we've now served over 1,000 congregations and several thousand clergy and lay leaders. And again, we want to try to be a bridge builder. And also, one of the things Karen does a lot of is helping congregations think in new ways about their space. So, one of the things we want to offer you is ways to kind of connect to your community and take a fresh look at your buildings and use your space in better ways. So, we've now partnered with over 100,000 sacred places over the years since our founding in the late 80s. Next slide. So I won't go into all the details, but just a quick overview of what we do. We do consulting, by the way. So this might be something you might want to keep in mind in future years. We help congregations with capital fundraising, whether it's a feasibility study or a full campaign. We can help a congregation measure its economic impact. We'll talk more about the HALO studies. One of the things that Karen did when she joined us 15 years ago is help congregations partner with arts organizations and share space. New Dollars, of course. You know, Karen, I'm realizing we don't list the National Fund here under our programs. We'll have to add
That
that.
is weird. I've been looking at that too. I'll have to change the slide. It's
So
probably our largest program.
exactly. Our biggest program is the National Fund for Sacred Places. We'll definitely talk more about that during the training, but it's a program that offers major capital grants to dozens of congregations each year. So we can tell you more about that tonight if you're interested. We do a lot of research and policy work. We'll talk more about our findings on HALO. And then we've done a number of publications, including how to raise money for your historic church or synagogue, or how to measure some of your public value. So we have a series of publications to kind of fill in some of the gaps, things that had not been published already. Next slide. So we want to talk a little bit about what we call the value or the public value of your church or synagogue. And this is a question that came up in the mid 80s with the board. I date back to the 80s and 90s. And the board started to ask, well, who uses our sacred places during the week? We know what happens on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, but what happens on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday? And don't we need to know more about that in order to talk to civic leaders about why our sacred places are important to preserve? So the next slide, I'll share a little bit of what we learned. So we partnered with a major university, the University of Pennsylvania, and we looked at a random sampling of churches and synagogues like yours around the country to look at, well, who uses those spaces? How are these buildings opened up during the week? Who benefits? So the most important thing, and we hope this will be seared onto your brain cells today, on the left, that pie chart, is perhaps the most important finding of our research to date, which is that 4 out of 5, on average, 4 out of 5 of the people who benefit from the programs you house in your sacred place, are not members. 81% are not members, which basically says that you all are de facto community centers during the week. And one of the reasons we want to really talk about this is we want to help you say to your mayor or to your city council or to your local foundations or to your local bank, yes, we're a Methodist church, but we don't just serve Methodists. Yes, we're a synagogue, but we don't just serve the Jewish community. Yes, we're Catholic, but we serve non-Catholics as well. So this helps us kind of redefine our sacred places as community places, as places with public value. We also learned that almost all congregations open up their buildings. They meet basic needs like food and clothing, and a lot of volunteer support, both from members and from non-members, to staff and support the soup kitchen or the concert series or the after-school program. So your sacred places, and you probably know this, but you may not have seen this data yet, your hubs of outreach and service and the community coming together in one place. But I can guarantee you, your civic leaders in your town or your city may not really understand this. So that's what we want to, in this training, we want to help give you the information and give you a ways to articulate your civic value. Next slide. So that first study looked mostly at how congregations like yours open up your buildings and share your space. But that led to a bigger question. What are all the ways that you add to the economic life, to the health and welfare of your neighborhoods? And we call this larger look the halo effect you have, the halo effect you have in your community. So if you can picture your church or synagogue on a map, you can almost picture radiating circles of influence in your community. That's your halo. And what we learned is for your average urban sacred place, your impact is $1.7 million a year, every year. And that includes daycare, after school, preschool, your spending in the neighborhood. Most of your spending stays in your community. It's your budget. It's partly how you share your space. It's when people come to your community to participate in the life of your congregation, they also spend money. So we'll talk a lot more about this in the training, but this is a very powerful way for you to articulate your impact. And the other thing I wanted to point out on the right, we looked at about 90 congregations in this second study, and the percentage of people benefiting from the programs you house has gone from 81% to 87%. So then the percentage of people who are benefiting that are not your members is growing over time, over the course of 20 years. So it's really fascinating. It really helps you broaden your case. Why should people care about you? Why might they help you when you need to fix the roof? Next slide. So I'm going to say a little bit about New Dollars and then turn it back over to Karen. Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So, we had this broad national study. That was the big picture. That's the macro picture. What we wanted to do is help you tell your story locally. How can you articulate your civic value? How can you articulate your public value? And make a case. Why should you care about us? If we're trying to fix our building up, take good care of what we have, why should you help us? Why should you give us a grant or give us a gift? So that's why New Dollars really started, is to take our understanding of your value and deliver that to you so that you can use that when you raise funds and you share your space and you engage your local community. Next slide. And just a quick overview. We started this, what's this now, 23 years ago. It's hard to believe, Karen. Oh man, I remember that first project in Philly, but it rapidly spread. So you can see we've been in the Midwest and the Northeast and the Southeast and pretty much everywhere now, Midwest. And you can see the variety of traditions, UCC, Episcopal, Catholic, Lutheran. And then also we've worked with preservation groups, working with a kind of interfaith group of congregations. So this has grown rapidly. But as I said earlier, this is only the second time when this was available to any congregation across the country. In the old days, you had to have a sponsor, a synod or a conference or a diocese. Now you don't need a sponsor. You can individually, as a congregation, participate in New Dollars. This is a brand new thing for us, so we're really excited. So next slide, Karen, and back to
Yes,
you.
and back to me. Yes, thanks so much, Bob. So I'm just gonna kind of talk about, what New Dollars, who New Dollars New Partners is for in terms of congregations. So yes, we would like you to have an older building. Um, but most sacred places that we serve are 50 years old. So, just, for like to put it in perspective, I will be I will be historic this year. So it's actually not that old, right? When we really, really think about it. We would love for you to have capital needs that are beyond your current capability to handle. So think about kind of larger projects, structural projects that have been maybe like backburnered a little too long, and now it's time to kind of like jump in that capital campaign and see what money you can raise. Maybe you want to deepen your community connections. We're going to talk about it later, but we have a really great module all about community engagement, and how to actually interface with the people that are your neighbors, both geographically or just demographically, and the people that you would like to serve. And then people that just want to use their building more effectively. I mean, we have these very large, beautiful buildings that you may only use like once a week. But maybe there is this larger potential for it to be used as a almost as a community center, particularly like the more rural you go. Oftentimes the congregational spaces are like can be like the town hall meeting spaces because that's the biggest space that can hold 80, 100, even more people. Uh, Excuse me for one moment. I had to let somebody else in. All right. So, what congregations will learn? So, just to keep this simple, your team will learn how to make your case as a community asset that goes far beyond what you do on the worship day. And as Bob pointed out, that 81% benefiting that are non-members is up to 87%. So, what is the value that you're actually generating for your community? We're going to help you calculate your public value of programs that particularly go out to the broader community. Do you have food pantries or coat drives, or do you have a particularly large AA group that's been meeting in your space maybe for decades? So we're going to try to figure out what the value of that is for the broader community. Making those necessary community connections and engaging with folks that were not previously on your radar. So hopefully we're going to get you to think outside of the box, outside of the usual cast of characters that you're used to kind of connecting with. And that's also great for the final point, which I wanted to make which is maximizing your funding support beyond who sits in the pews, and having the occasional bake sale or flea market. So we're going to truly try to like expand what it is that you can generate based on this kind of new income stream and new sources of money. those outside community connections, and that case that you make, that you build, is going to speak to the broader community of foundations, individuals, and corporations. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight too. And that may bring in the dollars that you need for your project. Okay, what do congregations walk away with? You will walk away with a case statement, or at least the draft of one. The hardest thing is staring at that blinking cursor. So we're going to make you stare at it and we're going to make you fill something in. Also, tapping into new community partnerships. So, who are some folks that maybe you've never reached out to before or never thought to reach out to, but you've always admired? We're going to start to have you think about those folks. You're going to strengthen internal sources of funding. Maybe there are some ways that you can fundraise internally that you haven't quite, you're like, you know what, we haven't done that in a while, or we haven't reached out quite in that way. And maybe that is something else for us to explore. And also, like I said, we're going to uncover community sources of funding. So maybe some funding sources that you at one point thought were outside of your reach. We're going to try to bring them within reach for you. So, what will you get? We do provide resources. You will get a physical copy of the Luther Snow book, The Power of Asset Mapping. You will also get a physical copy of the Managing Repair and Restoration Projects. So each team will get a copy of those. And then we have the Complete Guide to Capital Campaigns for Historic Churches and Synagogues. This is our publication. It is a very large publication, so we do provide that as a PDF, although we usually make a couple of physical copies on site to have at the actual in-person training date. But you will get all three of these. So, module one, now we're going to talk about what it is that you're actually going to be learning. So, by the end of module one, congregations should have crafted at least the first few sentences of their case statement. The statement will hopefully attract the attention of a broader audience, and we really hope that you will attract. Throughout the presentation, we will show you how to gather threads of your story that really go beyond our church was founded in this year. Listen, I'm not throwing a stone. I started many a history essay with the same thing. But what are some other ways that we can tell our story and talk about our history in a way that is engaging to the broader public? And then the three basic tenets of New Dollars, New Partners are who you are, what you have, and what you do. And all three of these relate to building your case to the community about your value. In module one, we present this framework for you to flesh out as you progress in the New Dollars in the different modules. And I will say that by the end of last year's first national cohort, Bob, I believe we had full participation and everybody had full drafts of their complete case statement.
Yes.
For everybody that participated. People were very proudly emailing them to me or handing them in. It is actually like it is a product that you actually get and is a way for you to get started. Module two, this is obviously my favorite module because this is where a lot of the work that I do personally at Partners comes into play. But this module relies heavily on two things. The first is asset mapping and helping congregation identify what assets and of all kinds that you already have or have access to. We're going to try to break it down. What kind of physical assets do you have? What kind of financial assets do you have? But also, what are narrative assets that you might have? What are some institutional assets or associational assets? So we really get you thinking about different types of assets that maybe you haven't quite thought about or something that you haven't quite realized that it is an asset. It is something that you have access to. The second piece is to help you identify new community partnerships for space use and how to hopefully seamlessly fold them into your work as a faith community. Some of those community partners could be critical in your fundraising strategy. They could be partners in that fundraising strategy. You need an elevator, you need an accessibility ramp. You may have partners in the building who would actually love to have those as well, and can be critical in helping you raise funds for that because that really makes the building open up to everybody. So module three is last, but certainly not least. It's probably the most anticipated module for all of our congregations because this is where we will be spending the entire day together and where we will have a lot to cover. This is going to bring together, again, hopefully your completed case statements, the list of assets that you bring to the community and the partnerships therein. And all of these pieces get plugged into your capital campaign strategy or can be plugged into your capital campaign strategy. So just like in telling your story and seeking out community partners, this section also instructs you on how to expand beyond your usual thinking. As you can see, there's a real theme here. To expand beyond your usual thinking, it also gives you a framework to plug your project, gives you a framework to plug your project into that makes the project feel more real and hopefully accomplishable. I know, just speaking for myself, I'm really big on setting accomplishable goals for congregations because if you can accomplish a smaller goal, it makes it easier to make the next one and the next one and the next one. And I feel like New Dollars, New Partners really kind of taps into that. Speaking of tapping, we're going to talk about tapping into community sources of funding. So as you can see, there are a lot that we squeeze into our in-person time together. So also in this module three, we will review the areas where we expand your traditional thought fundraising thought process. So at this point, the idea is for you, for us to help you create your own roadmap for fundraising in your area using your assets and those of your neighborhood and the broader community. So it's really bringing all of those pieces together. And actually, I'm going to pass it to Bob for the next slide because this is one of our newer slides. Bob
Yes.
loves to talk about it.
Thank you, Karen. Well, we had a really important question to answer, and we've done some research on this. So, if a congregation like yours embarks on a community-wide campaign and really makes a case to funders and donors both inside the congregation and outside, what is the result of that? When you embark on a campaign like that, where does the money come from? So we interviewed dozens of congregations, and what we've learned is, and by the way, we did this about 15 years ago, we did it again. The results are pretty much the same, which is that members are giving a little more than a third of all the capital funding. Now, what's striking about that, because of course most congregations have raised all their money from their members, right? That's the way we've always done it. So here, congregations are reaching out more broadly, and a third is coming from members, which means that almost two-thirds is new money. Really important. Almost two-thirds is new money. Another way to put it is, if a congregation embarks on this approach, it can raise perhaps 3 times as much as it would have raised by simply going to members. You can see grants is a big part. That's both private foundation grants as well as government grants. A handful of congregations we looked at received money from the National Fund, which we mentioned before. And then individual, so the blue slice of the pie at the bottom are individuals outside the congregation. So congregation is about a third. Grants are about 42%. 21% are individuals that are not in the congregation. They could be neighbors. They could be former members. They could be people who care about the ministries and the outreach that you house. So a whole mix of people there. So in the training, we will go into much more detail about these slices of the pie and how you can reach out to those folks in your own community to maximize your fundraising capabilities. So next slide. So by the way, along the way, we hired a professional evaluation firm to kind of take a closer look at what have been the benefits of New Dollars. And so here are some examples of what we learned. Obviously, congregations are learning how to raise money and develop relationships with donors. But one of the most interesting results is that more leaders and more members are motivated to take care of their sacred places and make better use of the space, which is huge. Now, you all probably have that motivation already, but having the larger congregation get excited about, hey, this is an important place. We want to take care of it. We want to use it well. We want to connect to our community. And we also learned that there was more knowledge on how to make better use of the space, which Karen has touched on. Obviously, fundraising. By the way, when we first talked to the Lilly Endowment about this program, we weren't sure whether we should call it New Dollars, New Partners or New Partners, New Dollars, because it's both. It's about funding, and we assume that's one reason you're here today, but it's also about partnering with the community. And it was hard to decide what to put first and what to put second because they're both so important here. Well, you can see what won out. New dollars went out. So, and then we learned that over several years, congregations, after doing New Dollars, really started to develop new and deeper community partnerships and then started to raise money in new ways. So those are some of the results from New Dollars that was discovered by an evaluation firm that we hired.
And just to, before we even continue, just to continue anecdotally for one moment, from our first national cohort we had last year, I have to say, like, these folks stayed motivated throughout the entire all of the training sessions and eagerly sought out funding opportunities like from the jump. A few of them even applied for our national fund. And one of them, actually, Pilgrim Congregational in Cleveland, told us not too long ago about a $300,000 grant from the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, which will allow them to repave their main parking lot with permeable pavers. So we helped to give them that motivation and we helped to give them that encouragement to actually seek out all these. So you can see kind of just from that example what may be possible. Um, and I'm gonna, Bob, there is a question in the chat. We can save it for later. I think it's more of a question for you, but the question for David, from David, I would like to
Right.
know more about whether your research can connect renovation or restoration and growth of active memberships in the congregation, not just community relationships.
Well, I think I don't know if there's a lot of data on this. I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that reaching out to the community, broadening your funding base, raising money to invest in your building, and using your space in new ways will attract new people to your congregation. Not always to sit in the pews necessarily. I think one of the cases we make is your family of people who care about you is more than just those who worship with you. There are people who might give to you, might volunteer their time, might want to help you, whether or not they decide to worship with you. So I think there's a lot of good evidence. It may not be quantitative information, but that's the evidence that we see around the country.
Yeah, particularly if they're having some kind of community event or anything that kind of creates this emotional tether to your building, because it was a place where they got food when they needed it, or it was a place where they were able to get a coat when they needed it, or maybe an on-site medical clinic, or maybe they saw a really wonderful arts event at your location. So creating those emotional touch points can be really important in terms of just your general overall health and wellness and people knowing about you and knowing more about you as a church.
Yeah, and David, the other thing I think we are seeing is that young people in particular are attracted to congregations that are socially active and serving people, and they want to get involved. And they may start with the soup kitchen, or they may start with the children's program, and then eventually they may sit in the pews and be a part of your congregation. But young people definitely are looking for congregations that are using their space and using their assets to serve the community.
Yeah, one of our colleagues has a really good metaphor that he uses that like people want to see a train that's in motion, not one that's like kind of stuck on the rails and not going anywhere. But if you're in motion, then they're happy to kind of join on. We have some really great examples, though, which Bob, I'm going to give the first two to you.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. So this is one of our favorite congregations. This is Quinn Chapel, the first AME church uh, west of the East Coast, and the first Black congregation in Chicago. Jim Moody, who you'll see there, he's since retired, but he was brought there by his bishop to close Quinn Chapel because it was so small and it seemed pretty hopeless. But what he did is he helped turn that church around, and now they have several hundred members. And so he participated in New Dollars. And one of the exercises if you participate, you'll be a part of this. It's called Meet the Mayor, where we teach congregations how to use opportunities when they're with influential people to make their case, to tell their story, and to get some help. And so Jim Moody, you see there in the left-hand photograph, he was so inspired, he met the mayor. And he actually sat down with the mayor, talked about Quinn Chapel, talked about how the city could help clean up some vacant lots nearby. This is Mayor Daley, the last of the famous Daley that there were several generations. And he responded. And so this church helped bring a soccer league into a vacant lot and helped turn that neighborhood around. And now it's, for good or for ill, it's somewhat gentrified. And this church is now a healthy church. So Quinn Chapel was an early participant in New Dollars, and they also participated in the National Fund. So they received a capital grant. And the next slide, this is a wonderful Lutheran church, like a block away from the Harvard campus in Cambridge. This was declared by the Boston Society of Architects to be the most beautiful new church designed in 1952. So as Karen said before, we definitely serve mid-century churches like this, built in the 50s or the 60s or even the 70s. But they wanted to do New Dollars so they could make their case. They wanted to do some asset mapping. They wanted to work with architects to reimagine their space. And they're now embarking on a capital campaign to replace their roof. This is a church that's squished in. I mean, you can imagine a block from Harvard, surrounded by institutions and university buildings. There is no parking lot. There's no room to expand, but they found a way, working with architects, to do some new outreach in the limited space they had. And they've made a case to the larger community. And New Dollars was one thing that helped fuel their whole effort to reach out and to raise money in new ways.
And then this last one is mine. So this is St. Paul's Episcopal in, a small town in Indiana, Columbus, Indiana. And they also participated in our program. And what they learned is that they actually had some unused space, some basement space that they didn't even want me to see. They were so embarrassed by it. And they invited community members that they hadn't really engaged with, including the school that was right next door. And when they showed the school the basement, um, the school nurse actually was the one that realized the potential of it. This basement actually had street access, direct access. So the church like cleaned it up, gave it an electronic lock, and gave it its own thermostat so they could control it from their phone. They don't even need to go into the building. And the school nurse could escort students into the building and into this basement space for essential items that they may be a little too embarrassed to ask for or to receive while in school. So some of it was clothing, some of it was health and wellness supplies. So, and it was such a success, and they became such an important partner with the school that they got this Community Member of the Year award back in 2024, which they proudly display. So this basement space that they thought was unusable and no one wants to be down there ended up being a real lifeline for kids, and they were actually looking to expand it to the high school a little ways down the road. So there you go. That's St. Paul's. Okay, so is your congregation ready for New Dollars, New Partners? So to make the most of this training, I mean, I'm just going to it's all on the slide here, but to make the most of the training, we do recommend a team of 3 people. I think we can have up to four people on a team, but we recommend about three. We do think a senior clergy person or a faith leader should be a part of that team, as well as lay leaders who have energy and passion for the project. I will also say if you have some newer members or some members that you can't get to join your board or your vestry or your buildings and grounds committee, this is actually a really great way to engage them because it's going to be for a limited set amount of time. So they won't feel like they have to, give so much time, but it's a really great way to engage a newer member. We will need you to commit to attend all three trainings. So there will be two trainings that are offered virtually, and these are between 90 and 120 minutes. So between an hour and a half and 2 hours. We try to keep them at a pretty quick clip. And then there'll be one training session in Philadelphia in person. This will be all day. We will give you breakfast, we will give you lunch, and we're going to be in a beautiful church, which we already have booked. And it is 3 months. The process is 3 months. So you have time in between. We'll have a session. There'll be about a month. There'll be another session. We'll have about a month, and then we'll have our in-person session. So, successful congregations. This was actually from a training that I just had in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but he just looked so happy with the activity. But anyway, successful congregations in this program, you're going to have a mission for your buildings, and that they're tools to carry out your mission, to carry out that mission. Um, Hopefully we're going to bring your vision to life. Dream big. Think about all of the things that you wish you could be doing with your building or could have fixed in your building. Maybe this is an opportunity to do that, and to raise those much needed funds to turn the tide, of that deferred maintenance. Let's get the deferred out of there and let's maintain these buildings. Openness to learning new ways to raise capital funds. So we do, as you can tell, like we're asking to think outside the box, and definitely expand your normal realm of thinking. So, and just interested in learning more ways about sharing your space with the community. Obviously, this is something that's a big passion of mine at Partners specifically. I really do think that when you open up to members of the community, even though they may not be joining you in worship, um, it will matter to them what happens to your space. And it will matter to them that you're there not just for the next year or two, but that you're there for the next decade or 5 decades or 100 decades. So really being a part, they feel, I mean, I've had conversations with people that say, oh yeah, this is my church, but they don't go there on Sunday. But they have such a connection to the building in their neighborhood that that's how they consider it. Okay, the nitty-gritties of it, the logistics of it. So costs. It is $2,100 per congregation. So that's not per person. So you can have 3 or 4 people on your team. The price is still the same. It does include a $100 non-refundable fee. However, if you are a member of the Lake Institute, you will get $100 off. I know it says for a team of up to 3 people, but I'm pretty sure we've had people bring 4 in the
Yeah.
past. So please, if you have a fourth person that really wants to be a part of it, we will welcome them. It does include the 2 virtual sessions. It does include the in-person session. It will include all those training materials that I mentioned earlier, those physical things and the one PDF because it's very, very large. You're going to get recordings of all of our trainings as well. You will get access to the public value tool, which is something we haven't even had a chance to talk about tonight, but it is something that it's an online source to help you figure out like what is the value of your food pantry that you currently have. Um, and obviously, we will have breakfast and lunch for you at the in-person training. The costs that are not included. We will come up, and it says 2, but I've definitely given, last year, I definitely gave people 3 or 4 or 5 different hotel recommendations that are close to the training site. But people have also stayed farther out of town for a cheaper rate. And then just know you're probably, because we are going to be in the city of Philadelphia, in Center City. So You probably will have to pay for parking, but um, but we'll send you some recommendations if you need it. So you're going to be responsible for that. And then any meals that are outside of the breakfast and lunch that I mentioned. So if you decide to have dinner in Philadelphia that night, we're more than happy to give you recommendations about where it's some great places for you to go to, or if you come Friday night, the night before. So the dates, this is also probably another really important logistic. And as I said, we're going to have fall 2026 and spring 2027. So module one in the fall is on September 15th at 7 p.m. That's a Tuesday. Module two, also, we love Tuesdays. Tuesday on October 6th at 7 p.m. And then module three is all day Saturday, November 7th, and that is in the city of Philadelphia. And
And
then
Karen, those times are Eastern time, right?
oh yes, sorry, yes, those times are all Eastern times. I figure we have, I don't know if we've had anybody from Hawaii join us. I don't remember looking at the registration list, but I think this will still kind of be okay for people on the West Coast. So in the spring of 2027. And we have March 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday, April 6th at 7 p.m., and then Saturday, May 1st. May in Philadelphia is a beautiful time of year to come to the city of brotherly love. So, and
And
those will
and
be
we
all day.
and
Mhm.
Karen, we might just say again, it's probably obvious, but the 2026 and 2027 are simply alternatives. So you can say, hey, we'd like to get going in the fall. That's great. Or you might say it would be better for us in the spring. So these are alternative. Each of these two choices offers the same three modules. Right, Karen?
Yes, correct. Yes, it's the same material, so you don't have to sign up for both. You only need to sign up for one. And as Bob said, maybe you're not going to be ready in the fall. Maybe the spring would be a better time for you. There will be there are right now actively both registrations on the website. Okay, and that's just Bob and I's information. I'll leave it up there for a minute or two, or a minute maybe. It is 7:51 Eastern. So I'm gonna stop my screen sharing so that I can see if there are any questions that we can ask live.
So feel free to unmute yourself if you have a
Yes,
question.
please.
Don't be shy.
This is Eric Lucas in Atlanta.
Hello.
Hi. My planning is somewhat chaotic. Can I participate in Module 1 this year and Module 2 and the live training next year?
We would no.
Okay.
You kind of have to sign in for the fall or the spring. It's
Okay.
like a package deal.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's two questions in the chat room. I'm just going to answer them live instead of typing it. So we have, and I'm sorry if I didn't say this earlier, I apologize. We'll have 8 to 10 congregations in each cohort. So in the fall of 2026, 8 to 10, and then in the spring of 2027, 8 to 10. That's how many participants in the cohort. The cost is required at the time of registration. When you register, a credit card will be necessary to do that. I think that that's the only way. We have been able to give people receipts if you need to be reimbursed by another entity. Is the public value tool available as a standalone purchase? It is. It is. There is a subscription. I believe it's $50 annually. Um,
And that's a new thing, Karen. Carla's asking that question. Carla Urban, thank you. Um, yes, we've updated the public value tool, made it easier to use, and we now want to make it available uh, to anyone across the country. So just reach out to us so we can tell you how to find that. Um, However, if you're in the program, I think you'll see how it connects to the larger goals, which is to make your case, tell your story, and raise funds. But you can do that as an independent thing.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to put a link to the public value tool in the I just put a link to the public value tool in the chat. Um my congregation has applied. This is Pamela. My congregation has applied to the fund for the 2026 grant cycle. Does this training duplicate what is offered to invitees to the fund grant process, or is it complementary?
I would say there's overlap, but they're not the same because the training for the National Fund, and Karen and I are very involved in that too, um, that's got a stronger emphasis on the capital project itself, working with architects and working through the capital project. The New Dollars program, there's more time spent with congregations on making your case, telling your story, working with your community, and raising funds. So they're all most of those topics are offered in the National Fund training, but it's much more condensed. So New Dollars allows us more time with you to work through these questions. So I would say there's overlap.
Yeah, and David asked a question. Oh, you're welcome, Pamela. David asked a question, is the public value tool the same as the Halo study? No, it is not. Bob?
I can say more. So the Halo, we look at 40 to 50 factors to develop that $1.7 million average. And by the way, we've done the same thing for rural congregations. So if you're rural, we can tell you about that. But the public value tool, the Halo is enormously complex. So we can do that with your congregation, but we need to come and visit you and interview you and gather the data. The public value tool is mostly looking at the value of the space that you share and the resources you put in. So say you have an AA program serving 20 people each week in an area of your basement. We can help you calculate the value of that you're giving to the community. So the public value tool captures a portion of Halo, but not all.
I'm just going to put back in the chat. I just put back in the chat a link to our website where there's the full information about New Dollars as well as the registration links. And then David responded, we have completed the Halo study twice and recommend it
Thank you,
most recently
David.
this year. Thank you, David. Thank you so much. And then what is the cost of a Halo study? That is a separate, I actually don't know that number off the top of my head. Do you, Bob?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So if you wanted us to do Halo, we'd love to talk to you about that. It's typically between $5,000 and $7,000. Kind of depends on the complexity of your congregation and all the things you do. But we will prepare you to gather the right data. We'll come and spend a day or two with you and interview your clergy person, probably your treasurer, some of your program directors. We'll come back and crunch the numbers and then deliver a report. So that's how it works. And if you're interested, just let us know.
Patricia, I took this cohort before 2024 with us. It has been a blessing to our church. We are now working on a capital campaign. Excellent.
Wow.
We have greater community reach.
Oh,
Thank
wow.
you
That makes my
so
heart glad.
much.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. Thank you. And then David is the guide to capital campaigns for historic churches and synagogues book available outside the New Dollars training.
Yes, it is. It used to be until about a year and a half ago, it used to be a physical manual, but we had so many updates to do, and we thought, why not make it virtual so we can always update it? So you can purchase a, PDF and you can print it if you want, but you can just let us know and we can arrange for you to purchase a copy. And by the way, just as an aside, if you are a large and very well-led congregation, you could potentially take the guide and run with it and do a campaign. But most congregations, that's just it's very helpful. It's step by step by step, but it's a little bit daunting to do it on your own. But it's a very useful guide. So if you're considering New Dollars, you might even get this in advance and start to read it because it's got a lot of very good information. And not just on fundraising, but things like, hey, maybe we want to set up a friends group or a supporting organization to help us. So it touches on a lot of topics that relate to fundraising.
Um,
You know, good question, Marvin. It used to be $100, I think, and I've forgotten what now that we have a virtual PDF kind of copy, I think it's less.
yeah, and I
So
don't know.
yeah. So if you can just email us, Marvin, we'll find out.
Um, is there any other questions? I'm keenly aware of the time. It is 7:58 Eastern. Um,
So Karen, say a quick word about registration. Is it more or less first come, first serve?
it will be more or less first come, first serve, and actually, I can indulge even more. So this is the page. And this tells you more about the program, a lot of which we covered. But then I want to send you to this section here. This is the frequently asked questions section. The cost, what's included, what's not, outcomes, key dates, how do we sign up, and if you click on that, register here for fall 2026 or spring 2027. So I just thought I would share what it is that you're going to look at, and then whom do you contact with additional questions? It's me. So everybody should have my email at this point.
Karen, Lee's asking if we can get the recording to them promptly. Can we do that?
So Zoom literally needs time to process. So I probably the soonest I could get it out to, if anybody really, really needs it, um, like by tomorrow morning, which is because I have to go downstairs and eat dinner with my family. But I just put my email address. If you don't already have it, I just put my email address in the chat, and I can make sure you get it first thing in the morning if that will work for folks.
We can also share the PowerPoint, right, Karen?
Yes, well, yes, we can. I could share the PowerPoint. Yes. You
Yeah,
just need it
Sunday.
by
We should be,
Sunday.
that should
Okay,
be in there.
great. Yeah,
Not,
Lee, if
not
you
a
want to
problem.
send me an email, um, that's all I need. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you, Danny. Oh, you're so kind. Danny's a colleague of ours.
Yes, and I see another colleague. I see Chris Aho. How are you?
Hey, Chris.
You're outside. Um, Excellent. Well, if there's no other questions, guess what? My email inbox is 24/7. I may not attend to it 24/7, but I will get back to you, I promise. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Bob and I wish you a good night. Thank
And we
you.
hope to meet many of you soon.
Yes.
Thank you.